Thank you so much. Rabbi Doron Perez.
Rabbi Benji Levy.
Such a dear friend, such a hero to many of us. I remember my favorite part about going to South Africa was when you'd make the time, usually after midnight, to get together. You led South African Jewry and through Mizrahi built it up, and now leading global Jewry through Mizrahi Olami, through World Mizrahi as the executive chairman. But you're sitting here in a different capacity today. And you're sitting here as the father of incredible heroes. You know, your one son shot on the 7th of October going down, your other son kidnapped. To this day, we're not sure exactly of his whereabouts, but we continue every single moment. Take us back to that day when you heard those moments, and when you heard about your sons. What were you feeling? What were you experiencing? What happened at that time?
It's nice to see you, especially under these circumstances, but also remember very, very fondly all those years together and the amazing role that you have played and continue to play in Jewish education in Israel and around the world.
Thank you.
Rav Benji, both of our sons were injured on that day. Daniel, who was missing in action, is missing in action, and then defined as a hostage. We now know 3 weeks ago that there was DNA testing done and sort of the blood in the area, and it's his blood. So we know that both of our sons were injured on the day. We hope and pray that just as Yonatan managed to recover and even get married, that the same will happen very soon with Yonatan. Daniel, he'll recover. Hopefully he's recovered and he'll be back with the rest of the hostages very soon. So, October 7th for us, the harsh reality was that by the end of Yontif and Shabbos, we had one son in Soroka Hospital with an injury being shot through the leg, the thigh. Yonatan, our older son, and our younger son, Daniel, what they say in Hebrew, Nutak Kesher. There was no connection with him. So Nutak Kesher, the army knows, we don't know anything other than circumstantial evidence. But on that particular day, our son Yonatan, meaning when we started the morning of that day, Yonatan was engaged, now married, an officer in paratroopers, was at our home in Yad Binyamin with Galia, his then fiancée, and Daniel was Shabbat of Simchat Torah with his tzevet, he's an officer in a tank, positioned in Nachal Oz. So we know that at 6:15 in the morning, Daniel, our youngest son Daniel, was already in the Migonit, the air raid shelter of the base of Nachal Oz, and at 7 was already in his tank and involved in defensive activity. Around that time, Yonatan was with us in Yad Binyamin, and the sirens started coming over in the morning. By 8 o'clock, he knew something was wrong. His Magad, his battalion commander, he's a Mempei, a company commander in the base in the south of new recruits of the paratroopers in Shomria. His battalion commander said anyone who can should come down to the south, down to Sderot, to meet at the Magen David Adom. He rushed out.
Was that official commands or
no.
you just told?
To the extent that when he got up and he said he's getting dressed, he's going down south. I said, no, you're not. I said, where are you going? I mean, none of us knew what was going on. So I said, what exactly did your battalion commander say? He said, remember he's a Mempei of new recruits. Like in my mind, I was thinking, what, has one of them got a cold? You're not feeling well. You have new recruits, You always think your sons are safe when they're in a training capacity because they're with new recruits. You want your kids always to be in courses in the army. So I said, where are you going? To Sderot. Why are you going? He said, the battalion commander said that if I can, I should go down south. I said, what do you mean, if you can? What? None of us knew what was going on. I said, just do me a favor, maybe phone him, because it was sent to all the officers in the base. He phones him, and I heard the call. He said, if you've got neshek, if you've got a weapon, come down south. I said, Yonatan, he said, hey, if you've got, what is that? That's not a call-up. I said, you've got your fiancé here. But he said, Dad, if the battalion commander says I should go, I should go. I do have neshek. I've got my handgun and my brother's handgun. We couldn't stop him. So, and then he ran out in.
So you went down with 2 handguns of that?
His handgun, and he took our other son's handgun out of his, which, by the way, they've only had handguns for the last couple of months that they managed to get licenses for, and then he went like that. He had left his M16 on the base because of Simchat Torah, and he went straight down south. At 4:30 in the afternoon, after multiple calls where we realized something was wrong, we eventually answered the phone from different numbers. He said, Dad, I'm in Soroka Hospital, and he told us 3 things. Firstly, I'm okay. I've been shot in the thigh and the leg. I'm being tested. I'm fine. I said, listen to my voice. You can hear I'm fine. A. B. I fought in Nachal Oz, and Daniel I think he's in his tank because his tank wasn't there. He knew what his tank looked like. So we thought he's okay. He's in his tank. He said, I have been trying to phone him the whole day. but it could be that he was in the tank from the morning. Secondly, he said, I cannot explain to you what's going on. I said, Dad, you just have no idea how many dead people there are. It's crazy. And thirdly, he was very concerned about his wife, his fiance's family, because they live inside. Now, he fought outside. He did not know at the time that that thankfully they didn't get into side. He had his battles outside and outside Kfar Aza. So he actually thought there was a very strong chance that, God forbid, terrible things had happened. She's also got siblings there and other family. Thankfully, none of that, thank God, happened. But that was our situation. He said, Dad, let's talk after Shabbos and after Yontif. I'm being looked after. By the time I spoke to him and went to the hospital, 12 hours now have passed since the morning and still nothing from Daniel. I actually went around the different hospital beds in Soroka there were other families also doing it because it was such a balagan. And I went from bed to bed, and I actually thought I saw him, and at times somebody turned around and it wasn't him. And there were other parents doing that as well. In fact, another one from Nachal Oz, because just another one from Golani, we didn't know, we were looking around. We decided to bring him home that night. Thankfully, the bullet went in and out of his leg. Mamash, a leading orthopedic surgeon at Beit Levenstein checked him out 2 weeks later, and he said it's unbelievable. He said to be shot through the thigh. It doesn't hit not the main artery, not any major nerves or bones. It's an unbelievable miracle. Many around him. I actually subsequently heard that somebody on the first day was also shot in the thigh and, God forbid, bled to death. So, if you don't put a tourniquet on in 90 seconds in the right place, you lose consciousness and can bleed to death. So,
who had done that? A medic on the spot?
He did it. He did it
himself.
Yeah. And there's another thing, because the guy, he got injured, after 6 hours of fighting, he eventually, in Nachal Oz, it ended up that they fought 50 or 60 meters from each other, but hours apart, the two. But Daniel had fought there early in the morning before he'd been captured, and Yonatan only arrived in Nachal Oz at 1 o'clock because he'd been in Sderot, and then a place called Tzomet HaKshatot, and then a place called different places outside Kfar Aza, and then outside Sa'ad until they got to the Mutzav Nachal Oz. But they went into Nachal Oz. They battled a lot of terrorists, and right at the end of the battle, him and 2 others were injured. The guy on the left of him was shot in the back and in the knee. The guy on the right of him was shot in the stomach. Thank God they're okay. But he realized that the guy next to him, both of them were like worse off than him. So he actually took his tourniquet and put it on the guy, and then got something else to stop the bleeding, and then only found some straw and things on and tied himself. So had he, God forbid, been shot in a different place, he wouldn't even be able to get to deal with himself, if you know what I mean. So they're absolutely lucky, just an absolute miracle. Thank God. They made their own way eventually. They took them to the front of the base, from the front of the base to Sa'ad, from Sa'ad to another Tzomet, and eventually they got to Soroka, having been in 3 different cars. By the time he left the hospital, he actually arrived in the hospital with nothing. When I say nothing, they'd taken his clothes off, so just his undergarments. He had no uniform. His guns were missing as well, his which has subsequently been retrieved. His cell phone, and still today, is gone. His wallet, because he literally arrived there having been from car to car to car with these injuries with nothing. He left the hospital. I had to get one of the Chabadnikim had to get a kippah for him from the hospital, and he literally left with a kippah and his the chaluk, from undergarment from the hospital. So when he left at that time, we brought him home because he was only moderately to lightly injured. They didn't have a bed for him. They didn't have crutches for him. They didn't have a wheelchair for him. Our doctor said, just bring him home. He actually could not feel his leg, but she said, you know what, she thinks it's okay. Let's treat him at home. I don't have the capacity to treat him. He came home. We hadn't heard from Daniel at all. But the next morning, we were really worried. We were worried before, but now really worried. The army only told us 5 days later, on the Thursday, officially that he was missing in action. Missing in action means they have no footage. They don't know. They've got no eyewitness, no footage, nothing. So thankfully, there's still hope when a person's missing. But on the Sunday at 4 o'clock the next day, Yonatan had been making calls, and eventually got hold of somebody who told him, and we could see with authority, that the tank was hit. There's 1 dead in the tank, and three which are not there. He asked if the dead body is that of the officer. They said no. So I think that was incredibly hard to know that, if one is dead in the tank, it's terrible, and the 3 of them aren't there, it's also terrible. And we knew that he's in harm's way. The worst case scenario is, God forbid, that his body's lying around somewhere and they may still find it. And it's crazy that in this situation, you're obviously, we're hoping for a miracle. Maybe he's hiding somewhere and fighting. But we said, we know our son. He's not hiding anywhere. I didn't really think he's hiding somewhere. So it almost seemed that the two things are, God forbid there's a body somewhere, or he's been taken captive. And we just hope and pray that if he has been taken captive, he's okay. So that was the occurrences of those 2 days of the Shabbos and the Sunday, yeah.
And what's the emotions going through all that? You share it over, but you're a leader on such a high level, but here you're a father, you're a human being, you're a husband.
Yeah. Rav Benji, what I've seen is it's so hard to know exactly how you react and what triggers you. There's sometimes I'm really, really strong and then I say something and I break down. And other times that I think I'm going to break down and I'm okay. It's just, I don't know how it works. The one thing I have learned, in fact, this I saw in Sherry Mandel's book, The Blessings of a Broken Heart, The Blessing, I think, of a Broken Heart. I know that when she lost her son, Kobe Mandel and Yosef Ishran, in fact, the day that they found the bodies in the cave in Tekoa was 22 years ago. And I remember it exactly. It was in ER because the day that they found the bodies was the day of Daniel's bris, his Brit Milah. And I remember in our community that you visited in Johannesburg, when I spoke about the naming and Daniel Shimon, his name, I spoke about Yosef Ishran and about Kobe Mandel. So I've always felt a particular connection because it was exactly, it was exactly on the day of his Brit Milah. But one of my friends who had really a tough life and lost people close to him said to me that as a rabbi, they really think I should read the book, The Blessing of a Broken Heart. They found it to be just given them the most chizuk and ability framework to deal with loss. And one of the things of the many things which just stood out in the book to me, and I think it describes what we're feeling, look, we hope and pray that this isn't a loss, and we hope and pray that we'll see him soon, but processing the enormous angst and the loss of his presence here at the moment, and who knows what he's going through. But for me, one of the things she says in this book is she says that you never know what triggers you, and your children have learned that she can go shopping and see a pair of shoes or something which reminds her of Kobe, and then there's just these unbridled sort of pain and tears, but then they flow through and they stop. She said her kids would say to at some point, okay, mommy, you've got a few minutes, we'll give you a time, we'll come back, and it's almost part of the routine. And for me, I've realized how powerful that is, because the one thing I've realized, that we say in Tehillim, that we talk about in Kabbalat Shabbat, we talk about the waves, Adir B'Marom Hashem, do we say Mishbarayam? Why are waves called Mishbarim? Because they break, they eventually break. No matter how strong, even Rahman Litzlan, a tsunami, which has wreaked havoc, eventually it stops. The torrent doesn't keep going. But regular waves, even regular big waves, a tsunami is just a crazy thing, but they eventually break. And no matter how strong and powerful they are, they end. And then another one comes. So the tough news is it's when they come, it's hard. We all know you can't really fight against a wave. Once it gets you just got to go with it, and it might it might turn you upside down, but it ends. Then you go back into the surf and it starts again. So for me, it's been up and down like in a wave. But the good news, thank God, is that they come and, Gamze Yavor, it comes and it maybe breaks you a little bit, but it itself breaks and you're okay and you go back into the surf. So it's hard to know, but thankfully it's okay.
Jacob, Yaakov's son, Joseph, is taken. And it says that they couldn't comfort him. And the reason they couldn't comfort him is because he knew in his heart of hearts that his son's still out there. So it's not a mourning, it's a completely different experience. What is that experience? There's nothing that can prepare you for it. Obviously, there's a hope that he's going to come home soon, and he should, and we continue to pray.
Yeah, whenever I read about that sort of, the pain of Yaakov, it's such a tangible thing, because as you say, God forbid, a million times there's a loss, there's a certain, finality in this world and a closure, and then you deal with it. And then there's Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of dealing with it, How do you deal with this uncertainty, And even in Yaakov and Yosef's case, where there was a measure of certainty, Taraf Yosef, and there's evidence, but there's even when there's a measure of certainty, there's uncertainty. And I think that is really, really, really difficult. Also, with the injury, just knowing how badly injured and what's the situation. And some hostages have come out and they're fine and others not. And I just think, and God, what he's enduring there. So it's really, really, really challenging. Lo Aleinu, Yaakov was 22 years. We're 73 days, and we hope and pray that it's, it ends very soon for everyone in a positive way. But I will say that I think when you go through something like this, for me, the coping mechanism for me has been to try be as much as possible in the moment. By the way, it's another thing that many people who've been through loss have told me. I listened very carefully as a rabbi, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing. Many people told me the only way that they can deal with the pain is one day at a time. Because if you project and you think, oh my goodness, is this what I have to deal with for the rest of my life? You can't deal with it. It's too much. It's too much. And therefore one has to keep oneself in the moment and say, I'm dealing with it now and today. And I've heard that from many people. And I think we all know how we have to live in the present. One of the things that I found that I've sort of found myself saying a lot is a lot of things I found myself saying are things that we all know. It's a little bit like the Mesilat Yesharim in the beginning. He said, I'm not going to tell you any chidushim. We all know this. The question is that sometimes they say that the thing about common sense is not so common, that we all know what we're supposed to do. And Mesilat Yesharim says, I'm not coming here to tell you anything you don't know, but I want you to take it from what you know intellectually to how you live your life. And in that gap is the challenge of life. I once saw something in a shir, I haven't seen it, I don't know where it comes from, but it was quoted in the name of the Chafetz Chaim, where the Chafetz Chaim was quoted in saying, he said, that life is actually not that difficult. It's people who complicate it. And I think what he meant by that is we all know how we're supposed to live our life. It's not that difficult to know how we should live our lives, but it's very difficult to actually live your life that way, because knowing what you should do and actually doing it are very, very different. What I felt is what we're going through now. I felt I don't have the luxury not to live our life with every skill and every insight possible. In sport, there's an expression, you got to up your game. I use it the whole time. You got to up your game. And sometimes we all know that I found it in sport. I played a lot of sport and always found that we always played better against better teams. They help you up your game. When the challenge is bigger, you've got to up your game, and you have to up our game. You can't rest in any laurels. So for me, what I found is I just have to live according to the way that we know we should live. And I feel that the default, if I don't, is just too difficult. So for me, there's an impetus to say, you know what, I have to live in the moment. We're doing everything in our power regarding Daniel, every diplomatic means that we can. And, he's also a South African citizen. So we're trying every possible thing of every possible connection with that and every other that we know about. So I believe we're doing everything we can. So many people are davening and praying, and meaning I believe spiritually, diplomatically, what I say about when Yaakov faced Esav, Doron Tefillah Milchama, diplomacy, right? We're trying to do everything in that area. Milchama, of course, Israel's doing everything it can, and Tefillah, and I think so many people are davening. So I feel that we're doing everything possible. And it's up to Hashem. Shlach al Hashem et Yovcha, as it says in Tehillim 55. You've got to sort of, put some of it on Hashem, because that's ultimately where it rests. But I feel that if I don't react in this way, it's just too difficult. So for me, a lot of my modus operandi is live in the moment and deal with things as they come. And if it is painful in that moment, honor the pain. Just let it flow. We can overcome. Gamze Yavor. And I feel it's the only way to do it. And for me, it's working. It's working. As I say, we're 73 days, not, Rahman al shouldn't be longer than that. But so I can't imagine what, Yaakov went through and what other families, the Golden families and others. And even though with some of them, there is sort of proof, but even so, you know what I mean? And with others, there's less, but other families. But I think one has to, in very uncertain times, develop the best coping mechanism. Otherwise, it's too much.
There was a very unique experience you had, besides both your sons, was that Yonatan went on, pushed off the wedding, but got married. And I can't even imagine, first of all, the conviction and the importance of deciding to get married and move on in that way. And at the same time, to be under that chuppah at that time. And you're just carrying such a paradox of emotions there. Take us back to, what motivated you to make that decision together as a family, and what was it like to go through his wedding?
Yeah, so the truth is, in the end, we actually had the wedding in its time. We just cancelled the venue. So it was at the same time, but a different place, yeah. The wedding was supposed to be, and when it was, on the 17th of October, Tuesday night, 10 days after, 10 days, exactly 10 days, or Le Gimel Cheshvan, Mar Cheshvan. So that's when it was, the beginning of the 3rd of Cheshvan, 17th of October. So I must be honest, we couldn't even think about it till the Thursday. Like, we knew we had this wedding, but we couldn't even think about it. We had, for the first 5 days, we had one son missing, another son injured. We just couldn't even think about it. And then the thing where we started thinking about it was when we heard officially from the army on the Thursday that Daniel is officially missing. Why did that give us some, I wouldn't say peace of mind, it's the wrong word, some headspace to think beyond the next moment, is because the officer, Yossi Shemesh, who's accompanied us every single day until today, become part of our family. He's a miluim, he's a colonel or a lieutenant colonel, but his job is, every family gets in the army, somebody accompanies them. When I said to him, Yossi, what does it mean to be missing? Can you explain to me what that means? He said it means that we don't have a body, thank God, and we don't have any evidence of what's going on with him. So I said, how long do you surmise from your experience that he'll be in this? He said, at least a few weeks. That for me to hear at least gave the first level of, I won't say permanence, but
almost a form of clarity.
Form of clarity. So, we know what we don't know. Yeah. And we know that that's how it's going to be. So for me, how do you even think of preparing for a wedding? God forbid there's a funeral, so I didn't know what to. So this at least said, this is the definition. So we know what we know, we know what we don't know. And then I've often told the story of Yonatan's commander came to visit him and told us how bravely he fought for the 6 hours. A lot of what we know about his fighting was from his commander, not from him. So I remember coming out of that conversation feeling proud how bravely he fought, and be so grateful that Hashem had spared him. And then when he said to Yonatan, he said to him, "No, Yonatan, you're supposed to get married next week. What are you going to do?" He said, "I don't know." And that's when I said to the commander, I said, "Hamfakir, do you mind if I ask you, what do you think?" He said, "What do I think?" He says, "Yonatan, you should get married tonight in your uniform here in the garden." He says, "Your father's rabbi knows what to do." He said, "Even if you just do the chuppah." He said, "Yeah, in the garden, bring 10 people, just do the chuppah." So I said to him, "Hamafakir, is that a command?" He said, "No, that's not a command." So I said, "I know that he's not going to do that." So I said to Yonatan, my time, I said, "No, we're not doing that." Not that I thought we would for a minute. But by the next day or two, when we had heard the official news, I said, "Okay, that Daniel's missing, we have to decide." I must say, Rav Benji, it actually wasn't a painstaking decision. It just, sometimes in life, decisions make themselves. Just felt that it just seemed like the right thing to do. Firstly, the fact that his commander, a traditional guy from Tel Aviv, said, "What should you do?" I said, "Of course you should get married." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because," he said, "we need simchas." He said, "There's so much pain, and we've got so." He said, "We're going to have weeks of pain now." I said, "We need a simcha. There's 1,200 funerals to come." So firstly, it made me realize that the decision to do a wedding with all these funerals around is not crazy, because he had this natural visceral response. And my wife felt very strongly they should get married, and what they're going to wait for, wait for Daniel. Is that enough? What does that mean? Wait, it's hard in life to spend time waiting, and you don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know what the result is going to be. They got a wedding. We decided they're a frum couple. They should get married. I phoned Rabbi Rav Rimon. He said they should get married if they want to, they can. It's a good thing. And the two of them, plus our in-laws to be our mechutanim to be and us, just felt like the right thing. And we went ahead with it. And we cancelled the wedding hall, and it was just a small wedding, but it was very, very, very special. And I can say, Rav Benj, for me, one of the things that I reflected on most is that I wouldn't have thought it's possible, but it's genuinely possible to have a simchadik, happy, joyous wedding while carrying such a deep sense of pain and anguish. It's possible.
Can you unpack that? How does someone have this space in heart for the top simcha and such a...
Do you know what I think? What I've learned, Rav Benji, is that in life's experience, things happen which don't make sense, meaning the experience, it doesn't make sense, but it happened, you know what I mean? So I don't know, all I can tell you is we went through a wedding with a son who was still missing and is missing, not knowing where he is. I don't think it's possible not to cry and feel pain. But the biggest thing that I learned is that wasn't the overarching feeling. It wasn't a sad wedding. I think the people who there said it was one of the happiest wedding they've been at. I often quote one of our friends, Tammy Goldberg. She said it was the holiest, saddest, happiest wedding she was ever at. And you know, when it was happy, it was unbelievably happy. And I would say 95% of the time it was happy. You know, so how does it happen? When under the chuppah, the rabbi mentioned Daniel's name and mentioned that he's not there, and wherever he is, you know, his presence is being missed, and we have to daven for him. Those 3 minutes, I think, I don't know how long it was, if it was 2, 3, or 4 minutes, but those were amongst the hardest in my life until this point. They were so hard, and I couldn't keep back the tears, and my mechutin was holding me up on the one side, and my son was like holding me on the other side, and my wife, it was so difficult. And in that time, there was nothing but raw pain. But I saw, you know, but then you got to up your game. It's a wedding, you know. Well, you're going to keep crying. So we wiped off the tears and just stood under the chuppah and focused on Yonatan, and it was happy. It was happy. So I don't know how you make that transition, but it happened, you know. So yes, I always say, is the background music throughout this wedding Daniel's? I mean, the most profound thing about the wedding was Daniel's absence, obviously. It's there, but it was the background music. It wasn't the simcha was there, and maybe the fact that he wasn't physically present there meant that everyone understood that, and somehow it added a certain holiness, a certain focus, a certain fervor. And yes, the family pictures were difficult in the moment. You think, Daniel's not here, and it's incredibly painful. There were one or two other friends who came. It was very painful to see them, but it was few and far between. So how does it work? As I've said, I've seen that the human heart is capable of Vegilu birada, you know, Vegilu birada, to rejoicing the trembling. So how is it? There's trembling. You can't.
Trembling and rejoicing and rejoicing and the trembling.
Exactly. And they're there and you can't separate them. But David Amenah says Vegilu birada. How do you do that? So I saw how he did it, you know. I've often also, you know, one insight I had the other day, I saw something about Rav Kook, and I've seen about many great rabbis that I've heard stories that they heard terrible news on Shabbos, and they didn't cry or they didn't express it. And the moment, the story about Rav Kook, the moment he made Havdalah, he burst out into tears. And I thought, no, how does that work? But how can it be that you know of such terrible news, or what you artificially now, how does it work? It always seemed a little bit, but I see it's possible. I don't know how, but it's possible. It's possible to somehow say it's Shabbat and, you know, make a decision to be in that moment and say it's Shabbat and just keep it in its place. And then when it's no longer Shabbat and it's no longer, then you can't keep it in its place. So I don't know how it works, but I know that it does work. You can. And I will share with you one other thing. A lady, through a mutual friend, contacted me. A mutual friend had seen, there's no way I would have connected with this lady. She was in another continent and country. We've got no mutual friends that I'm aware of. The one person that knows us both is a person that I met a long time ago somewhere, and knows somebody who saw the wedding. And somehow this lady, unfortunately, her daughter committed suicide a number of years ago. Her daughter and a friend went through a terrible sexual abuse when they were young from somebody else, and her daughter never came right, and eventually was in an institution, had mental health issues and committed suicide. And this is her son getting married, and her friend told me she's dreading the wedding. She's dreading it. She's not going to get through it. And then the friend told her about our wedding. She saw parts of it. She contacted me, and we spoke. And she just sent me a WhatsApp the other day. She said the wedding was unbelievable. I said to her, I promise you, you're going to get through it. I said, I know you're dreading it. And I know when you look, it's another thing I've learned, when you look from the outside into experiences, it's not the same as the experience itself. Sometimes we don't have in life the the toolkit or the skill set or the ability to genuinely judge an experience from the outside. It's only when you're inside it that you've got any frame of reference, because our frame of reference is looking from the outside and seeing people going through it and saying, how would I ever handle that? But thankfully, you're not in that experience, if you know what I mean. But I can say to you, Rav Benji, that I said to her, we're just regular people. We got through it. I promise you'll get through it. I know you will. And I told her some of our coping mechanisms, how the things are separated. And she said, but how does it work? I said, that's just how it works. I promise you that's how it works. I did say the only advice I can give you is, firstly, you have a wedding and a simcha, look forward to it. Look forward to it, number one. Number two, there are going to be times that your daughter's presence or absence is going to be felt. Honor it. Cry. It's okay. I said, I promise you, we cried under the chuppah. It's okay. But I promise you it'll pass. I promise you it'll pass. Because it does pass. And I phoned her on the wedding day as well, and I chatted her through it a little bit, and she WhatsApped me afterwards. She said she now feels bad for having doubted and that dreaded a simcha. I said, no, you did. That's what you feel. It's natural. But she said it was very, very special. So for me, I think that what the good news in all of this for me is that the human heart and the human psyche and the human spirit, and certainly the Jewish psyche and spirit from so many collected years of such trauma that we managed to overcome, is that we are much, much stronger than we think we are. We are much more resilient than we think we are. We should never, ever have to go through things like this. But for me, I can say that we're a lot stronger than we think we are, and it is possible.
Have you heard of the concept anti-fragility from Nissim Taleb?
I haven't, please.
So basically it says that there's some things that are fragile like a glass. It breaks when it falls. Amen. On the other hand, there's things like plastic which are resilient. You drop them and they bounce. But there's a third type of thing which we see in very few areas, but the human body has it. For example, our immune system gets stronger when it's exposed to bacteria, or through micro tears of our muscles, they grow. That's what anti-fragile is. It grows through.
Anti-fragile sort of core.
Yeah, and I think that's the Jewish people.
Yeah.
But I think what you just explained so poignantly is that, and I'll be very honest, the vast majority of us are not going through what you're going through. And therefore we look at you and we in absolute awe and trepidation. And we want to hug you and want to give, and we don't know how you're doing this. And at the same time, because you have gone through that experience now, you are able to speak to that woman. So it's that anti-fragility that collectively as a people has built us. And it's unbelievable. And I feel so terrible that, you're such an incredible leader and been through so much. But to go through this, I feel so terrible. But I know that while it should have never happened to you, I know that this is going to turn you into the greatest leader ever. I don't know. I didn't even think you could get better. But that's just going to be able to help so many others through that experience.
Yeah, look, for me, I think, Rav Benji, I think that we all know. And so many things that we know. It's not so we know these things, but, every experience you go through is an opportunity for Kiddush Hashem. And I don't know, firstly, what you said, I don't know why I'm calm and I'm speaking with strength. I don't know why. I wouldn't have thought, it's not that I thought about this that much, but when I saw so many close friends going through difficulty, it crossed my mind how would I react? Not that you ever want to know, but it's so difficult to know, you know what I mean? Because, I remember thinking, I don't know what's going to come out, It's a little bit like when you get drunk, you know what I mean? Not that I've ever been drunk, but people are often concerned that if you get drunk, what's going to come out, you know what I mean? What part of you is going to come out? And you don't know until you're drunk, and hopefully we're never drunk. But because it's a state that you can't really, you can see other people drunk.
Like upping your game.
Yeah.
You can have as many practices as you want until you're on the field.
Exactly. So you don't know. So this is the same thing. But what I do know intellectually, what we all know is that when you're in a certain situation, we all know that the only element of free choice we really do have is what decision to make in any situation we're in. We actually, and first and foremost, our thoughts. We know that we can't control which thoughts come into our mind. Often we have these fleeting thoughts, but you can control how much you develop that thought and what you do with it and how much presence you give in your mind. We all know that when we tested, or in any life experience, what we want to do is live by Kiddush Hashem, meaning to try and make the best of the situation. I don't know where the strength is coming from. I think part of it is, I feel very blessed that I have the strength in this very difficult situation, and it's the strength for now, and I don't extrapolate to anything. You go through everything. All I know is what I'm going through now. But I do think regarding, perhaps where it comes from, number one, I think, is the resilience of the human spirit. I genuinely believe we get strength that we don't think we've got, number one, anti-fragile one. Two, I think if a person has emunah and faith, it gives a lot of strength. Even if there's anger, sometimes we get angry. I don't feel any anger, but sometimes anger is a thing of that, we often get angry with people we love very much. I think anger is a sign of a healthy relationship, but for some reason I don't feel any anger. And I do feel a profound sense of strength from the fact that I really feel that we're not alone. I think one of the biggest things I've taken out of this is I don't know how people get through difficult life experiences with a profound sense of aloneness. It's impossible to be alone in this because Israel is going through this. So yes, not everyone's going through what we're going through, but there have been 240 hostages and their families going through this. So we're not alone in that, as painful as it is, but we're not alone. And there's 1,200 dead, and there's not a family. And in the way that things have happened, it's just shocked all of us. There's almost isn't a family that doesn't have a sibling or a son or a family member in the army. So again, that angst is not the same as this, but everyone's going through this. We all traumatized, and I think, and therefore people are with us because we all going through, number one. Number two, and I think our family, with our friends in Israel, in Yad Binyamin, our friends in South Africa, our friends all around Israel, and from our Mizrahi role, people around the world, and people that we just haven't met, who've just heard about what we're going through, because it's such an unimaginable thing. We do not feel alone. Our friends are with us, our family are with us, people we don't know are with us. And I just feel that sense of not being alone is very profound. It doesn't take away what you're going through, but it does redeem you from a sense of aloneness. And I think it gives a lot of strength. And the tefillot, people davening and the care and concern. So it gives a lot of hope and it gives a lot of strength.
I think it's so important you share that, because so many of us, every time I send you a WhatsApp message, every time I think and daven for Daniel, and I'm just one of literally thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and we want to help in some way. So while I can't take away the pain, the fact that it does is so important. I want to ask you a crazy question, so feel free not to answer it, but you said to ask anything. If you could wind back time, I remember we had conversations in South Africa when you were deciding about if to make Aliyah and when to make Aliyah. You were at the top of the world in South Africa, did incredible things, and you were coming to a Mizrahi that wasn't where it is now, where you've taken it to. And your kids at a delicate age had to come to Israel, and now with everything we've been through, do you feel like you and your wife made the right decision to move here?
It's a good question. Absolutely, and I'll explain why. I believe, I don't think one can genuinely look back and say, well, what would have been the right thing to do? A, you don't have the perspective. Hindsight is 20/20, but you don't have the perspective. But secondly, does one know what would have been? The what if, meaning, what if he would have stayed? Does anyone know what would have been? What are you comparing it to? You're comparing 9 years of living in Israel to 9 years of not knowing, So it's not, It's not comparing apples to apples. So I genuinely believe in life, you make the decisions with the factors that you have at the time. Was that the right decision for our family? 100%. Why was it the right decision for our family? For a few reasons. We went on a 2-year shlichut, as you know, which became 15 years. There were times that I was ready to come back and my wife was not. There were times that my wife was ready to come back and I was not. So I think we're very blessed for 2 reasons. We made the decision at the time that it felt like the right thing for my wife and I. And I say my wife and I because it has to begin with the couple. Because we don't know when you say, is it the right thing for the kids? Somebody came and said to me, I remember they said to me when we were leaving South Africa, you're doing the best thing for your kids. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't know what's the best thing for my kids. In fact, I don't know what's the best thing for anyone, because we don't know what the future holds. When I say you're doing the best thing for the future, I don't know if I'm doing the best thing for the future, because the future's in Hashem's hands. I know that I'm doing the best thing for what seems the best thing for the future now. And I never felt we were leaving South Africa. And I'm a very, very big believer is that you don't leave a place, you go to another place. Because if you leave a place, if you run away from your problems run after you. And I must tell you, Rav Benji, that I only realized it in the last few weeks, when I realized that until Parshat Vayishlach, Yaakov was always fleeing and running away. His mother says to him, Kum brach Padan Aram, run to Padan Aram because your brother Esav wants to kill you. When he leaves Lavan and comes back to the land, he says, Ki boreachu 3 times. And I realized Yaakov's always running. If you're always running away from Esav and you're running away from Lavan, they're going to follow you. What? Esav's not going to disappear. Not so much so that Chazal say that Lavan has been chasing the Jewish people forever. Because Lavan lakor takol, you can't run away. And you know what just dawned on me? It dawned on me that in Parshat Vayishlach, Yaakov does the controversial thing. He lets Esav know that he's coming back. And there's some opinions in Chazal say, why are you waking the sleeping bear? And I think because he understands, I can't keep running. I've got to face it. And yes, if I face it, there are consequences. I might get injured. And you've got to confront your demons. And in this case, he confronted his demon and therefore Esav's demon. And he got injured. And that injury lingers with us. We don't eat the gira nashe, the sciatic nerve until today. We injured. But he confronted his demons. And when he confronted his demons, he not only overcame his fears, but he was able to overcome the threat of Esav. And I only noticed this year of Benji, only this year, that when his name changes from Yaakov to Israel, I noticed that Rashi says, Rashi that I'd read but hadn't noticed what he said. He said, you will no longer be Yaakov, the one who everything comes of Yaakveni through deceit and through, when you can't confront people, you don't tell the truth and you're deceitful. He said, you've now got it by b'schut, because you, not b'mirma, b'schut. And he said, la'ein kol, everyone can see. And therefore now you're no longer Yaakov, the one who's Yaakveni zeh parmaim, you're now Yisrael. What does Yisrael mean? The one who confronts, but it's not the one who confronts. Yaakov's name should have been Sarel. I only realized this year. It's because it says, Ki sarita im Elokim ve'adam. You contended and you wrestled and you fought with Sarita. So your name should have been Sarel, the one who contended. Your name is Yisrael, meaning you will be the one, because you were able to confront, that your seed after you will be able to, and not only will be able to confront in the future Israel, vatuchal, and you will be able to overcome. So I think for me, just coming back to your question, we didn't leave South Africa. If we left South Africa because we were leaving problems, then there are other challenges and problems in Israel.
We came to
Israel. And therefore, when you come to Israel, we made it for the right values. We came to Israel because we felt it was the right place for us and the right place at that time, the right place for the Jewish people and the right place for us. I'll tell you another thing, Rabbi Benji, which I'm so grateful for. My wife and I made the decision together. Had I in any way pushed her into it, or she pushed me into it, it would be so difficult from a Shalom Bayit issue to deal with such difficult ramifications if we were not 100% on the same page. And my advice to all couples is, any big decision you make, you have to be on the same page. And there were times that I wanted to go and times that Shirley wanted to go, and we made the decision when we were in the same place. But I think the fact that we made the decision for the right reasons, and the fact that we made it together has been, I'll just tell you one other thing, is that you would think that it's not an easy age to make Aliyah with kids of 15 and 13. They both had an incredible Aliyah and a smooth Aliyah. Some of our younger kids found it hard. It's interesting that some of the younger kids actually had a much harder Aliyah. And there's all types of factors, and that's not the topic of discussion. But I will say Dafka, the 15 and 13-year-old Yonatan and Daniel, just really acclimated well and fitted into Israeli society well, went to yeshivot, into the army, and thank God they both did brilliantly.
Stood up to the plate as Giborei Israel. I wanted to ask you a different question. We started an initiative called theMissingHeroes.com, where basically communities around the world have each adopted one of our missing heroes. A lot of people have asked me if they could specifically adopt Daniel, and there's whole shuls, schools, communities, and they asked, can you tell us something unique about him? So I said, we're going to be sitting down. I'd love to just hear about Daniel so that we can feel for our tefillot who we davening for, what kind of person is he?
Thank you. Firstly, we greatly appreciate people to adopt Daniel. And as part of this Kolisula Ravens episode, adopt many of the incredible heroes that we have. Now, our sons are both heroes, as are thousands and tens of thousands of the people, hundreds of thousands who just, everyone is putting the Jewish people before themselves. That's been the big story here, that Hamas, with the terrible pain they've caused us, our people and our family, they've brought out the heroism in all of us, that we maybe forgot the camaraderie in all of us, that we all prepared to put the Jewish people and the state of Israel before ourselves. So a little bit about Daniel. I'll say, I think the most salient thing which stands out about Daniel, he was a very, very difficult kid to raise, because he's incredibly strong-willed. One of these ADHD kids who he would often say to me in parenting, "Dad, we're getting into a power struggle." And he said, "You know you're going to lose." He said, "I don't know why you keep doing it." He would often say, "Dad, we've been through this." He said, "You're not going to win in a power struggle." And he said, it just doesn't work that way. And that, I never beat him in a power struggle, because he just was too strong.
Well, you're one of the strongest people I know, so
no,
that was training. He's smashing them.
Smashing me, no.
For sure.
I realize about Daniel as bringing up this child is, if Daniel does not want to do something, no force on earth will make him do it. If he does want to do it, nothing will stop him. I'll give you one example. In South Africa, we had a curriculum. It was called the Shorashim quiz. We had a consultant who came to help us teach Hebrew, Rabbi Karmi Gross, and we did it through learning Shorashim, the root words. So one year, I was the head of the school. I said, my son's going to win the quiz. And boy, oh boy, did we learn. Yeah, I think he was in grade 4 or 5, and and he learned. Rav Benji, we went through all 500 Shorashim, every variation of them. A kid had never learned for a quiz like this. He came second. The following year, we were going away, my wife and I, to I think our 15th wedding anniversary. He says, "Dad, I'm thinking of doing the Shorashim quiz." I said, "Daniel, look, firstly, it's a week away. We're going away. Don't waste your time." I didn't say don't waste your time, but what do you mean? You can't wake up a week before. He said, if I win, what will you give me? That's his language, Tell me, incentivize me that it's worth it for me. I saw already he did it last time for me, not for him. He's a very good negotiator. So we agreed on something. I promise I would have offered him our house, because he had no chance. I offered him, I can't remember what it was. And he accepted it. My wife and I went away. And I forgot about it. I didn't think for 1 minute he was going to. I know how hard I learned, and I know I didn't even think about it. I get a phone call while in the middle of our anniversary, we were away, saying, "Mazel tov for Daniel." I said, "Mazel for what?" "Daniel won a quiz." I said, "What quiz?" "The Shorashim we didn't do." He said he did. He won. The kid the parents of the kid who beat him the year before phoned and said, "Unbelievable, your son, we lost to the better." I said, "Did Daniel win?" "There's no way." I said, "I know what I did." Meaning,
he put his mind to it.
He just put his mind to it. So if he wanted to do it because he felt it's the right thing for him, nothing can stop him. So we hope and pray. He's an extreme sport kid. He got injured through wakeboarding, one of these, he toys anterior cruciate, in wakeboarding, you go around, it's like surfing, and, most normal people go around on like on a speedboat. He goes over the ramps, but not only over the ramps, then he does a 360 in the air. And eventually in one of his 360s, he toys anterior cruciate ligament. His profile was 64, 65. He said, "Dad, there's no ways I'm going to be behind a desk. I'm going." He said he needs to get it up to 72, but I said, "Then you can go to tanks." I said, "Why don't you do Modian?" He said, "Dad, you can do Modian, it's fine." And he said he's not sitting behind. He worked for a year at physical therapy to get it up to 72. He fought with the army until they got up to 72, and he was able to go to tanks. He absolutely loved the tank. He loved the challenge of understanding the tank and being a commander and officer. He loved the power of the tank. So he's a kid very stylish kid, very stylish. That's kind of Hebrew, the stylist, Yeah. So my wife often said, "How's he going to manage this kid in the army? Like showers twice a day, has his haircut once a week, loves the finer things in life." This kid, Rav Benji, went to the army, and in 1 second, I don't know if it was maturity, what Sahal did for this young man. He became a mensch. Not that he wasn't a mensch before, but he was a youngster, He became the most disciplined chayal that there is. I've actually looked at his notebooks where he talks about what he demands of himself. One of his friends who's been for two months in Gaza as a camp commander said, that, Daniel, he said he's never seen somebody push himself as much as Daniel did. He decided that he was going to serve the Jewish people in the army in the best way possible, and he put his mind to it. He was amidst along the way in some of the courses, and he just decided, and then he managed in the cold, without his showers, and if he puts his mind to something, and this kid really became an incredible mensch, soldier, Moshe Nefesh for Klal Yisrael in the army, and his strong will, we hope and pray that he was okay on that day from the injury, and that the strong will, the physical strength and the emotional and mental strength is able to get him through this. And we really appreciate all the tefillot for Daniel, Shimon, Ben Sharon, his physical, emotional health, and please God, he should return with all of the other hostages soon, please God.
Oh man, the Gemara says, "Ein davar omed b'pnei ratzon," nothing can stand. But this isn't just his ratzon, which sounds like the strongest.
It had to be his ratzon. And was he? I've got other stories, but I'll leave it at that.
Just to conclude, do you have any final message you want to share for Am Yisrael or the world at this time? We're putting back on your second hat as a leader of a global movement that you've really done incredible work with. So you're wearing the father and the leader hat. What do you want to tell all of us?
I think for me, the message is the obvious message that we're all going through, is that it's such a pity that we needed Hamas to remind us that we one people. The outpouring of oneness after 5 years of 5 elections and so much disunity and between Israel and diaspora communities within Israel. I'd never seen in my lifetime so many Jews who can't hear the other side. There was everyone, and everyone's right in their own mind. I didn't see how this thing was going to go forward. When we saw what happened in Yom Kippur with the service, I said, how? No one is getting off the high horse. How is this thing going to end? I thought it's only going to take a tragedy. I hoped and prayed that I thought, God forbid, it would be an attempt in somebody's life. I don't know, how is this actually going to? And then along came October 7th, and I think Hamas taught us such a painful lesson, that as important as the arguments are, and they are important, there's something much deeper and more important, that we one people. And if we can't, as Rav Soloveitchik talks about Brit Goral, we have a covenant of fate, and that precedes the covenant of destiny. The arguments are important, and our destiny is important, but we have to navigate them as a people. I think we forgot that. And that's why Pesach comes before Shavuot, because Pesach is the story of the birth of the Jewish people, the big Jewish family. And we all know that what we need before who's right in the family is to keep the family together. And I think in all relationships in all human interactions which are about connection as opposed to competition, a war is about competition. You've got to beat your enemy. Sports matches are about, you get friendly games, but who takes a friendly seriously? If you step onto the sports pitch, and I was always a very competitive sportsman, the aim of the game is to play with sportsmen, but to win. If not, then go do something else, But relationships is not about winning. And familial relations is not about winning. It's not about getting the upper hand. And certainly with a spouse and with a family and the Jewish people, it all became about who's more right. The problem is, if you're more right than the other and the relationship is frayed and destroyed, then what have you done? Because it cannot be that who's right is more important than the familial relationship. And I think we've had to rediscover, and my hope and prayer is that, please God, the sense of empathy that we have for each other, the sense of one family, the sense of the parashat of Yosef, of feeling each other's empathy. It says about Yosef that, and I saw a Ramban, and I'll end with this. The Ramban says about when the brothers were thrown into prison by Yosef, they didn't know it was Yosef, thinking that, they didn't know it was Yosef. Yosef said, I think you people are spies. You say, okay, bring your younger brother. And if you bring your younger brother, then I'll know that you're telling the truth. And they come out of prison and sends them back to bring Bina. And they say, we're guilty. The Ramban says, look at what they say. They don't say to each other they're guilty of the sale of Yosef. For whatever reason, the brothers believed that Yosef needed to be sold. They believed that he was totally wrong. As painful as that is, they said we were wrong because we didn't hear the cry of our brother. Even if we thought we were right, our brother's crying from the pit, and you turn a blind eye to your brother when there's no empathy, when you cannot in your self-righteousness or even in your righteousness hear the cry of your brother. He said, maybe this is happening to us because we couldn't hear our brother's cry, even if we were right, but it's our brother. And when we deal with brothers, it's not about who's right. It's about, can we empathize and ensure that the relationship itself and the integrity of the family stays together despite who's right. And I think this war has brought us together in this way, and my hope and prayer not only that we win this war and bring back, and remove the danger from the Jewish people and bring back every single hostage, but we continue with a sense of empathy, a sense of togetherness, a sense of camaraderie, that we navigate the massive challenges that we have together, because together we've got a much better chance.
I just need to tell you that when you send me, I remember sending you a message a day or two after it happened. I was overseas, and you responded much quicker than I would have expected. And you said to me, please daven for Daniel among all the others. And I can't tell you what those words meant. The fact that, you've got your own son there, but you're saying in the same sentence, worry about everyone there. And that shows that we truly are a family. That you have a son that you brought into this world, but you have another son that's part of this Brit Goral. You have over 100 other siblings that are there. We have thousands of people that are suffering, that are injured. We have over 1,000 people that died, and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, that are feeling this trauma somewhere. And so I just hope and pray that Daniel is brought home, b'mehera v'yameinu, that every single other hostage is, that every single person that's sick is healed, that every single family that needs healing experiences that, and that we never, ever, 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 we just learn our lesson. We never need someone else to teach us this lesson. We're there for one another. We get off our high horses, and we live up to the Perez example of both of your sons, of your entire family, and of all of our Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi Benji. Thank you for the opportunity, and Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thanks, Dad.